Let's have a word of prayer. Oh Lord, bless my brothers and sisters here who have hunger for your word and want to grow in their knowledge and understanding of all that you have revealed. Oh Lord, honor that yearning that you have placed inside of them. Let the knowledge of the scriptures, the understanding of the scriptures, the power of the scriptures be made manifest in their lives mightily. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, crazy story today, but this I think is just such powerful stuff. So let me, I'll read the chapter, and I encourage you to follow along with me as I read through it. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who lived in a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim took a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, but she was unfaithful to him. She left him and went back to her parents' house in Bethlehem, Judah. After she had been there 4 months, her husband went to her to persuade her to return. He had with him his servant and 2 donkeys. She took him into her parents' home, and when her father saw him, he gladly welcomed him. His father-in-law, the woman's father, prevailed on him to stay. So he remained with him 3 days, eating and drinking and sleeping there. On the 4th day they got up early, and he prepared to leave. But the woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh yourself with something to eat, then you can go." So the 2 of them sat down to eat and drink together. After the woman's father said, "Please stay tonight and enjoy yourself." And when the man got up to go, his father-in-law persuaded him, so he stayed there that night. On the morning of the 5th day, when he rose to go, the woman's father said, "Refresh yourself, wait till afternoon." So the 2 of them ate together. Then when the man with his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the woman's father, said, "Now look, it's almost evening. Spend the night here. The day is nearly over. Stay and enjoy yourself. Early tomorrow morning you can get up and be on your way home." But unwilling to stay another night, the man left and went toward Jebus, that is, Jerusalem, with his 2 saddled donkeys and his concubine. When they were near Jebus and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, "Come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night." His master replied, "No, we won't go into any city whose people are not Israelites. We will go on to Gibeah." He added, "Come, let's try to reach Gibeah or Ramah, spend the night in one of those places." So they went on, and the sun set as they neared Gibeah and Benjamin. There they stopped to spend the night. They went and sat in the city square, but no one took them in for the night. That evening an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, who was living in Gibeah, the inhabitants of the place were Benjamites, came in from his work in the fields. When he looked and saw the traveler in the city square, the old man asked, "Where are you going? Where did you come from?" He answered, "We're on our way from Bethlehem in Judah to a remote area in the hill country of Ephraim where I live. I've been to Bethlehem in Judah, and now I'm going to the house of the Lord. No one has taken me in for the night. We have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves, your servants, me, the woman, and the young man with us. We don't need anything." "You're welcome at my house," the old man said. "Let me supply whatever you need, only don't spend the night in the square." So he took him into his house and fed his donkeys. After they had washed their feet, they had something to eat and drink. While they were enjoying themselves, some of the wicked men of the city surrounded the house. Pounding on the door, they shouted to the old man who owned the house, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." The owner of the house went outside and said to them, "No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, don't do such an outrageous thing." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and sent her outside to them. And they raped her and abused her throughout the night. And at dawn they let her go. At daybreak the woman went back to the house where her master was staying, fell down at the door, and lay there till daylight. When her master got up in the morning and opened the door of the house and stepped out to continue on his way, there lay his concubine, fallen in the doorway of the house, with her hands on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. Then the man put her on his donkey and set out for home. When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine limb by limb into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, "Such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the days the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine, we must do something, so speak up." All right. What
So
a
we take it
story,
that
huh?
she's dead, is what?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and what's interesting here, the author it does not put in little, I mean, his explanatory comments are things like, Jebus is near Jerusalem and stuff like that. But he doesn't have any explanatory comments like, and then this terrible thing happened. He just tells the story. And yet it's so dramatic. I mean, right, you can see this woman crawling to the door. And she's got her hands on the threshold like this. And she dies and lays there all night. And the man comes out the next morning like, all right, let's go.
What's wrong with donkey?
Yeah. The story is just, it's designed, isn't it, to kind of make you go, what? What the heck? What's going on here? Well, let's look at the very first phrase. I put it for you in green. In those days, Israel had no king. Now a Levite who, and it goes on and he tells a story, right? So, the fact that Israel had no king, what does that have to do with anything? Why does he mention that?
There was no leadership, no spiritual leadership.
Okay.
No rules, regulations.
Yeah, keep going. Where else have we seen that phrase before?
All the way through.
Beginning of every chapter.
Well, this is like, I think, the third time that we've seen it. And it's going to appear, this will be the last verse of the last chapter. If someone has their Bible open, go to the last verse of the last chapter of Judges. What does it say? In other words, this is kind of a summary of a slightly longer expression. What's the full expression? The very last thing.
They did whatever they wanted to do.
Yeah, someone read it.
In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes.
Yeah. So the author's final stamp on this whole book of Judges, what the whole book of Judges is about, in some respects, is how there was no king, there was no leadership, there was no spiritual authority being exercised, and everybody just did what they thought. And so what have we seen as we've been going through the book of Judges? Things just kept getting worse and worse and worse. If you don't have something making sure that it's right, what happens to it? It gets more and more wrong over time. And so this chapter starts out with a portion of that phrase. In those days, Israel had no king. Well, what's that got to do with anything? Well, it's designed to remind us of that expression. No, they had no king. And everybody did what they thought was right. And that's why what we're about to read is such a horrific story. Everything's a mess back then. So let's just go over your thoughts and impressions of some of the characters in this story. Let's start with the concubine. So first of all, what is a concubine?
It's a woman who lives with a man without the benefit of marriage.
Yes,
Like mistress, right?
something like that. Yeah. So
In her case, she was a slave, I think, because they kept calling him her master.
yeah, that wouldn't be unusual, even in marriage. But like Sarah calls Abraham Lord. But yeah, the concubine is an arrangement where the man has all the benefits of marriage, but the woman has no benefits of marriage. In other words, she doesn't inherit property. Her kids are not in line to inherit the estate or receive the name or anything like that. It's just kind of an arrangement. Who's the character you think of in the Bible most when you think of concubines? Or at least I think of this character the most. Does anybody?
David had concubines, Solomon had.
So I think of Solomon, right? Yeah, because Solomon, you remember, I always get it mixed up. Was it 300 wives and 700 concubines, or 700 wives and 300 concubines?
Think of the wardrobe.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that's the image or picture of Solomon, right? You know, every time he went out and he saw a pretty girl, he's like, oh, add her, I'll take her too, you know?
Not very
And
wise.
some of them became wives, and the wives probably were ones that were arranged marriages with foreign leaders, right? So, oh, marry the daughter of Pharaoh or something. Yeah, good. Now you're at peace with Pharaoh because you're married to his daughter. But the concubines were just probably pretty girls that he ran across, and he just added them. So it's interesting in verse 3 here. It calls her husband, and it goes on to talk about his father-in-law. But it's very clear that, so it's using that kind of language because how else would you describe it? But it's clear that she's a concubine, meaning that she's not a full wife.
Is it because she was unfaithful to him? Like she was his wife, and then because she was unfaithful to him, she became a concubine?
Okay, no, so I wanted you to catch that though, Tammy, thank you. And so in verse 2, what's important about this woman? She was unfaithful to him. So it's not that she was a wife and then she was unfaithful, so now she becomes a concubine. When he took her, she was a concubine. So she never was a full wife.
Is that why he sent her out to those men? I mean, why would a husband send his wife out?
That's a good question,
I
isn't it?
mean, that's been her guy so.
Yeah, that's a very good question. But we're going to come to the man first. We'll stick with the concubine for a minute. So does she speak in here at all? Does she say anything? Yeah, she doesn't talk. What do we know about her?
Just that she was unfaithful. She went back to live with her parents.
Yeah, she was unfaithful, and she left to live with her parents. So that idea of unfaithfulness is introduced again. Where have we seen unfaithfulness in the book of Judges so far? Now think big scale, don't think of individuals.
Samson and Delilah.
Samson's first wife.
Try to think big scale, not of individuals. Where have we seen unfaithfulness?
Everywhere, all the.
Yeah, who's been unfaithful throughout the whole book?
The Jews, the
The
Israelites, yeah.
The Israelites have been unfaithful, right? And so now we get toward the end of the story. You're right, Tammy, and you're that's a powerful thing about stories is that sometimes stories have a little ambiguity to them and wondering, and you often have to look for certain clues or elements to try to find out if it's being more explicit about certain things, and other things it's less explicit. So this woman's unfaithful. So is that partly why he let her go out like that? What man would do that? I mean, would you do that to your wife? Or would you do that even to your concubine?
Well, and plus the fact that he went to go get her from her parents' house, that he made the effort to go after her.
Yeah. I mean, he made a big effort to go and get her back. So it's like he really wanted her.
And they call her father the father-in-law.
Yeah.
Like family.
Yeah, they're like family.
Yeah.
And yet when push comes to shove,
But father-in-law was gonna send out his virgin daughter too.
let's come back to that.
Oh, okay.
But then he lets her out like that. Who would you? I mean, would you even do that with your ex-wife if she was like unfaithful to you and robbed you of everything you had and stole your house and everything? Would you? You still wouldn't do something like that, right? Yeah. So there, in some ways, the concubine is a tragic figure. I mean, that imagery of like, when it says that when he opens the door, you know, she's laying on the doorpost with her hands on the threshold. He could have just said she was laying there dead, right? No, she's laying there like this.
Like she suffered so.
Like, yeah, let me in. And that's where she dies, you know. Can you think of a more tragic image than her, and yet she's also not pure. She's not like if you were making a movie, she wouldn't be like the good character, and everything bad happened to her because she was unfaithful in the first place, right? So it leaves you with that ambiguity of is this Israel? Has Israel's been unfaithful? Is this what Israel deserves? To be mistreated and left at the threshold begging to come in? And that's kind of what the outcome is for her, as sad as it is. How about the concubine's father? So the man, when she's unfaithful to him, he goes back to get her, and the father welcomes him in. And this is to me, it's kind of a lengthy section. And yet I'm sure the author has a purpose for it, right? So they're in there eating and drinking for 3 days, staying overnight. And then on the fourth day, it makes a point, right, of emphasizing that they stayed and ate and drank longer. So he ends up staying a fourth night. Why doesn't he just say they ate and drank for 4 nights? This is drawn out, right? So what is it telling you about the father-in-law? And then the 5th day, they eat and drink some more in the morning, which is why they're not traveling very far. So that does help to explain part of the story. The reason they only get from Bethlehem to Gibeah is because they didn't have a full day to travel. And have you ever been traveling and you're driving on the interstate and it's like time to stop, and you go, well, there's a Quality Inn, but I kind of like the Hilton Inn and Suites, and so let's go to the next exit and see if there's one there. You go to the next exit and there's not one, and it's getting darker, and you're getting tired, and you're like, let's go a little further, and there's not one there, and then
I think
now
we'll make it. Your famous last words.
yeah, now you're getting really far, and then there's Smitty's Happy Motel. Looks like it was built in the 1940s or something. Oh boy, that's the only thing now. You're in the middle. It kind of creates that picture, right? So they're traveling and it's getting darker, and the servant wants to stop at the next town, Jebus, and the man's going, no, let's go a little further. Let's get to the next town. So it explains why they didn't get very far, but also that long section. What is it telling you about that father-in-law? What kind of man is he?
He wants company or something.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't want his daughter to leave.
Or maybe he was really into the son-in-law. He really liked him. He liked him.
So you're all psychologizing here, right? Was he lonely and he needed company? Did he really like the son-in-law and wanted to spend time with him? Did he not want his daughter to leave? If you could just generalize it. What kind of a man is the man that says, please stay, let's spend a little time together, let's have something to eat, let's have something to drink first, spend the night here? What kind of a man does that? A
Generous?
man that you would say, yeah, hospitable and generous, right? So he's a good man. He's the kind of man that welcomes people in and is willing to take care of them day after day after day. He's a good man. Let's compare him to the old man in the village. So they get to Gibeah and they go to spend the night in the square. And
Not to. He's like, don't do it.
yeah, the old man says, don't spend the night in the square. Please come to my house. So what would you say about that old man? What kind of man is he?
He was hospitable.
Yeah, he's hospitable too. He's generous. So
Maybe
there,
concerned.
And he knew there would be trouble.
yeah, you see a comparison there between the father-in-law and the old man in Gibeah. Except the old man, he's got a little something quirky about him too. What is it?
Well, he offered his virgin daughter.
Yes.
And his concubine both.
got some wicked
Yes.
neighbors.
So when the,
He
yeah,
didn't
when
even know
the,
the other guy. I mean, he didn't, the other guy was a stranger, and yet he'd be willing to give up his daughter for his daughter.
yes.
Here's my virgin daughter.
Yeah, these homosexual rapists are outside the door, and he's saying, don't do this, this is a terrible thing, this man is my guest, you can't do that to my guest. But then he's willing to give up his daughter, and the man's concubine.
That's what I'm, oh my goodness.
Right,
I don't
right,
understand.
right. I mean, have you ever known somebody that morally, their thinking processes were so distorted and got so out of whack that they thought they were doing something good when they were really doing something wrong? I'm trying to think of a specific example, but I know I can remember situations like where there was domestic violence in the house, and the man was saying, I know I shouldn't have hit her, I know I shouldn't have done that, but I did this, and he points to something else, and you're going like, that's no better, I should have just taken the keys away from her and made her walk, because, then we wouldn't have had this fight. No, you shouldn't have made her walk, you should have driven her home and not hit her, what? So you see how people's thinking gets distorted and messed up? So here's a man that has hospitality, and yet morally there's something reprehensible about him, which shows how out of whack things have gotten, right?
Abraham's nephew did the same thing. I'll give you my daughters, just don't take this angel of the Lord.
We're gonna come to that.
Oh.
Yeah, you're good, that's good. You're thinking along the right lines, right? You're on the right lines, exactly. Let's compare all these characters now. So there's characters with mixed baggage. But how about the people of Gibeah? People of Gibeah.
Yeah, we gotta stop at a nice Jewish place. We don't wanna stop at one of those other places. And then they're the ones that don't stay in the water.
Yes. Yes. I think that's a significant clue that we're supposed to pick up in this story. That the servant is saying, let's just stop in Jabez. You remember, Jerusalem at this time was not Israelite. It belonged to the Jebusites. And it was actually King David later on that conquered Jerusalem and made it his capital. But at this point in time, it's not Israelites living there, it's Jebusites. And so the servant here is saying, well, let's stop overnight at the Holiday Inn in Jabez. And the man is saying, no, I don't think we should stay with foreigners or with Canaanites, with people that are like not kosher, that aren't our people, they're not God's people, they're not in covenant with God, they're not right. Let's find some Israelites. It'd be comparable to us, your car is breaking down and you stop in Max's auto shop and your wife says, well, let's just get it fixed here. And the husband says, no, let's see if we can find a Christian mechanic. There's got to be a Christian mechanic. And down the street is John's auto repair shop, and he's got like the little ichthus symbol on his thing. And so you go there, and he cheats you and you spend twice as much as you. No, let's go to Gibeah. That's Israelites there. And then they go to Gibeah, and compared to the old man and compared to the father-in-law who welcomed this man in to eat and drink, what happened in Gibeah? Nobody took him in. Nobody took him in. Yeah. So they're just going to sleep in the park. And they're okay with that. They figure they have what they need. That probably wouldn't have been that unusual back in those days. But I think, Cheryl, you're right. We're designed to see the contrast. So at the beginning of the book of Judges, what were the Israelites supposed to do with the native inhabitants, with the Canaanites?
Kill them.
They were supposed to kill them, right? Oh, horror, ethnic genocide. Oh, it's terrible. People see that, but they don't see the whole story. God said destroy them, partly because that was their punishment for evil, but partly because he said, if you don't destroy them, you're going to become like them. And that's what we've seen in the whole book of Judges, right? They didn't destroy them, the first 2 chapters of Judges, and they end up worshiping the same gods, doing the same evil things. And now here we are, and now it's the Jebusites who he doesn't go to see because they're foreigners, and the Gibeahites, who are from Benjamin, they're God's people, and they're doing what the Canaanites would have done, what the pagans would have done. They're worse. They become worse than anybody. And we'll see that when we compare this to the story of Sodom and Gomorrah that Cheryl thought about before. But I think we're definitely supposed to see that comparison. How about the Levite? What do you think of the Levite? So what is a Levite to start with, I guess? One of you knows that.
Member of the tribe who are priests.
He's from the tribe of Levi, and Levi was the priestly tribe. So Levi was the tribe that was specially dedicated toward the worship of the Lord and serving the Lord. So if anybody should have known better not to take a concubine, it should have been this guy, right? But he doesn't. And then what do you think of this guy? What's your impression of this man?
Awfully twisted.
Yeah, this is very twisted, isn't it?
Why did he cut her off? I mean, what was the purpose of that piece? That, in 29, why would he feel the need to cut her up and send her throughout Egypt?
Yeah, let's look at that.
Because I
Well,
don't
let's even go.
understand
Let's go before that, so we're just chronologically in tune with the story here.
He thought he was doing right, because it says right there that they did what they wanted, or what they thought was
Yeah, he
right.
did what he thought was right.
Yeah.
So he throws this concubine out to these men that are sexually out of control. So in his mind, what does that say about women?
They don't count.
There.
Yeah, it's okay to use them. That's what they're for. That's what they're there for. That's what they're there for.
He just thought that his daughter, the other guy's daughter.
And the other guy, was
I'm not
willing to
sure
throw out
that's
his
all
daughter. In the
that's
end, the daughter doesn't go out, just the concubine.
Yeah.
In fact, that might say something too. The man was willing to throw out his virgin daughter, the old man. This man just throws out the concubine, almost as if to say, hey, let's take care of your virgin daughter. She's still a virgin. She might still get married. This woman, concubine. That's what she's there for, right?
Maybe he harbored bad feelings because she was unfaithful to him.
That's possible too. Now, it's interesting that he traveled all that way to get her. But-
Maybe he did it with the intent to make her suffer down the line, especially how it ended.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to psychologize too much what he might have been thinking there. But he is not being the loving, caring protector that you would expect a man to be. In fact, he's the opposite. And then let's get to the part that Tammy was talking about. In the morning, he opens the door. Now, why doesn't he come out and check on her? Like, you think he'd lose some sleep? Like, be waking up at 3 in the morning. Gosh, I hope she's okay. I better go look for her.
Well, I'm sure he heard the screams.
Hearing noises too.
Yeah. No, when does he come out?
When you got up.
Yeah, in the morning. So it's almost as if he has a good night's sleep, and he wakes up, and the alarm went off. It's time to get moving. So he comes out of the house, and isn't this powerful? In verse 28, he said, to her, "Get up, let's go." What is that? Not like, "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Have you had breakfast?" It's just like, "Let's go." He's totally focused on his agenda here and completely oblivious to her and to her, what she experienced and what her pain was. And look so he says, "Get up, let's go." But there was no answer. And what would you expect in this story? If this was any kind of a man at all, what would you expect next? He cried. He was sorry. He vowed revenge. No, what's he do? Throws her on the donkey. Oh, boy. Puts her on the donkey, right? And then, verse 29, when he reaches home, He took a knife and cut up the concubine, limb by limb, into 12 parts and sent them into all the areas of Israel. Now that sounds like something that's in like one of these Middle Ages movies, right? You know, I'll cut William Wallace's head off and put it on the pike so everybody knows not to attack the king. You know, crazy stuff. Cutting up body parts and sending them U.S. Postal Service to all the tribes? What is that? This is messed up. And then look at verse 30. Everyone who saw it was saying to one another, such a thing has never been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine. Such a thing, such what thing? What are they amazed at?
They got a body part in the mail.
Yes. Again, there's ambiguity, right? Are they horrified at the fact that she was raped until she died?
Do they know? Doesn't say
It
they
doesn't
know
say.
why. They don't even know maybe why.
It doesn't say.
When he reached home.
Yeah.
Now, in the next chapter, we'll see that we don't know exactly when they come to know or how they come to know, I don't think, but in the next chapter we'll see that their response presupposes that they find out that they know.
Oh, okay.
Because what they're going to do is attack the Gibeonites. But at this point in the story, we don't know if they even know. There is ambiguity here. So are they horrified that this woman was raped until she died? Or are they horrified that she got cut, the body parts got cut up? It's like we don't even know. It's like everything about this story is icky. You can't get a grasp on it. You can't get a handle on it and say, well, this is what happened and this is what it means. It's the whole thing is just shrouded in confusion and ambiguity and mess and immorality and horror and shock. It's a terrible, horrible thing that's happened. And it's just presented, just like the story of Micah, the last 2 chapters that we've been studying here. It's presented in just kind of a matter-of-fact way, as if to say, you want to know how bad the Israelites got when they didn't have a king and everyone did what was right in their own eyes? Well, here's a snapshot. Look at what they were like. And we see this, and you're left going, ah. There's also a strong... So there's no good characters in here, right? There's no good guys. This is a story with no good guys, at least at this point. Some are better than others, but no good guys. But we're also, I'm sure, intended to see a comparison with something else. Let's look at that comparison. Let's go to Genesis chapter 19. Hey, before we read chapter 19 too, I don't know if I'm thinking about doing it this year. I'm still working on what our Sunday schools and Wednesday night Bible studies are going to be for 2018, 2019. I'm trying to mix up different things in there. One of them is a course that I taught some years ago at Hope on homosexuality, because it was very well received, and it's all stuff that people in the church are not hearing. People in the church are hearing stuff in culture. They're not hearing what the Bible has to say about it. So we spent some weeks looking at it in depth there, and it was very well received, and I'm considering doing that. But there are 7 passages of Scripture in the Bible that are very clear about homosexuality. This is one of them, the story of Gibeah. And so the response of people that are the people that are trying to alter or change what the church sees about this, for example, many in the ELCA, probably most in the ELCA as far as I can tell, is to look at this passage and say, well, the problem in this passage is not that they were homosexuals. The problem in this passage is that they were rapists, showing inhospitality toward a guest in their community. And so God is upset when people don't show hospitality. A loving homosexual relationship, God is perfectly good with that. That's the way they would read this story. Having read the story, how would you answer that?
Well,
You
they
look-
didn't ask for the women. They only wanted the man.
Yes, and look at the old man's response when they come pounding on the door wanting to have sex, verse 23. No, my friends, don't be so vile. Since this man is my guest, don't do this outrageous thing. Look, here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can use them and do to them whatever you wish. In other words, we're intended, I think, to see that this old man is twisted. But even in his twisted state, he knows that somehow raping the man is in a way more outrageous, more vile, more abominable than raping the woman, which is inconceivable to us. I mean, aren't both terrible, absolutely terrible? But there is a sense in which the one is even more terrible because they're both rape. But in the one case, the homosexual rape, it's also homosexual, which is an abomination. So this is one of the 7 passages that we use to show what the Bible teaches about this, that homosexuality, I should say, for right now, if I ever teach the class, I'll tweak this stuff for you, get into the details. But for right now, let me just say this. Homosexual sex is an abomination in the sight of God. And the Bible uses that word. That's what it's called. So it's a terrible thing. So I think we're intended to think of this other story here in Genesis chapter 19. Because as we read it, you'll see the similarities. I'm going to read it fast because we're running out of time. Genesis 19. The 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed himself with his face to the earth and said, My lords, please turn aside to your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you may rise up early and go on your way. They said, No, we'll spend the night in the town square. Oh, that sound familiar?
Yeah.
But he pressed them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, that we may know them. He's not talking about getting to know, their Facebook profile, right? Lot went out to the men at the entrance, shut the door after him, and said, I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Behold, I have 2 daughters who have not known any man. Let me bring them out to you, and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof. But they said, Stand back. They said, This fellow came to sojourn, and he has become the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them. Then they pressed hard against the man Lot and drew near to break the door down. But the men reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. And they were struck with blindness, the men who were at the entrance of the house, both small and great, so that they wore themselves out, groping for the door. So, what do you think of Lot in this story? Aren't you intended, you think, to see a comparison between Lot and the old man in the Gibeah story?
And do you think the old man knew the story of Lot?
Yeah, we'd just be speculating. I don't know if it ties in or not. But we should know the story, right? So that when we read about the old man, we should immediately say, this old man is like Lot. He knows that if the men stay in the square, they're going to be attacked. So he brings them in the house. But then also, he's not perfectly right in the head because Lot would have given his daughters out, just like this old man offered to give his daughter. I mean, the comparisons are too strong to not see that this story was the backdrop for the story of Gibeah. So what then does that say about Gibeah? It's saying Gibeah, an Israelite town, a town of God's covenant people, a town of people who have been given the law by God, they have now become worse than Sodom. They're just like Sodom. So remember we've talked in Judges about the spiral? Things keep going down and down and down until we get to the story of Micah at the end. And what do we find at the bottom? They're worshiping a false idol, just like the pagans. And what else do we find at the story, at the bottom, the story of Gibeah? That they're practicing the most impure, abominable sins in the sight of God that the Sodomites did. The same stuff. That's how bad it has gotten. I think we're intended to see that as part of this story. All right, so I hope you can join me again next week, and we'll look at the next segment of this story about the Gibeonites.
And did you notice that and they're spinning down, not only do they have it, but they feel that it's their right to push it on everybody else.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
So,
Yeah. All right, any other closing comments or thoughts or questions? All right, thank you for being here. Shall we close with prayer? Lord, we recognize that we are in a society that were it not for your hand and the work of your provision and your spirit, for the presence of righteousness that you strategically place around us, our society would go downhill a lot faster than it does. But we know too that we are born in sin, and that sin runs throughout our corrupted nature, and that if we were left to ourselves, we would spiral down and get worse and worse. So we thank you that you have saved us. We thank you that you have not let our lives run their regular course, but you have intervened. Continue, Lord, to intervene in our lives, and intervene in the lives of our family members and our loved ones and our neighbors and all those for whom we pray, that we too would be able to share with them the salvation that we have received ourselves through Christ our Lord. Amen. All right, thanks everybody. I hope you find this as interesting as I do.